My name is Nora Ellis, and I was 32 when my sister placed a rental deposit in front of me and asked for a signature, as if the decision had already happened somewhere without me. It was a Tuesday evening at the kitchen table in my parents' townhouse. The paper was clipped to a glossy brochure for a new apartment building called Harbor Row. My sister, Lila, sat across from me with her coat still on, tapping a pen against the top page. Our mother stood at the counter pretending to make tea, which meant she was listening to every word. "It's just the holding deposit," Lila said. "They need one more person listed because my income is new. You don't have to pay anything. I only need your name, so they know somebody stable is connected to it." The form had my full name typed beneath the line that said, "Additional deposit party." Under it was a blank signature box. The amount was $2,800. It was not a dramatic number. That was the first thing that made me uneasy. The most expensive family problems rarely announced themselves as disasters. They arrived as small paperwork, warm voices, and somebody saying, "It's only temporary." Lila had been working as a freelance designer for less than a year. She was talented, restless, and always trying to make one brave choice before the last one had settled. I loved that about her when we were younger. I had also spent most of my adult life being asked to absorb the cost when her brave choices ran short of money. Mom put a mug in front of me. "Your sister is finally moving somewhere safe. It would mean a lot if you helped her get established." I looked at the brochure again, to bedrooms, rooftop gym, river view, move-in special. Lila had told us she was looking for a modest place near her new client work. This was not modest. It was polished enough to have a concierge desk and a monthly parking fee. "Why am I listed as a deposit party?" I asked. Lila smiled quickly. "Because I entered your name when I started the application. The leasing office said it was fine. You just need to sign here, and then I can finish everything tomorrow." That sentence made the room feel smaller. She had entered my name, not asked whether she could, not sent me a link, not told me a decision had been made. Entered it. Dad was not there. He had been out of town for work, and Mom had already decided that made the request more urgent. "Lila has already paid part of it," she said. "The unit will be gone if this drags out." I held the pen, but I did not sign. I turned the page over and saw a small reference number, an email address for the leasing coordinator, and a note in gray print. "Deposit responsibility is subject to application approval and executed lease terms." Lila leaned forward. "Nora, please. It's a small favor." I had heard that phrase so many times that it no longer sounded small. I slid the form back across the table. "I'm not signing until I know exactly what my name means on this deposit." Her face changed first. Then Mom's did. "You're making this harder than it has to be," Lila said. "Maybe," I told her. "But I'm going to make one call before I sign anything." They thought I was delaying a deposit. What I was really doing was protecting the part of my life that had always been easiest for my family to volunteer, my name. On the drive home, I kept replaying the scene in pieces. Lila's pen, Mom's careful tea-making, the casual way Dad had been described as out of town, as though his absence made the questions simpler. I thought about how quickly a room can create a decision without saying it directly. No one had ordered me to sign. They had simply arranged the emotional furniture so that refusing looked like the only aggressive act available. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew that was why the form had unsettled me. It was not just a page. It was a test of whether I could still be moved into someone else's plan before I had time to name my own. Lila and I had never been enemies. That was part of why the request was so complicated. A stranger asking to use my name would have made me laugh. My sister asking made every boundary feel like a betrayal of our shared childhood. She was for years younger than I was. When we were girls, she climbed the tallest tree in the neighborhood and I waited below with a blanket because I was certain she would fall. She changed majors twice in college, then moved across the state for a job she hated, then came home with a suitcase and a plan. Every version of Lila had been sincere. Every version had also needed a bridge between the plan and the next paycheck. The first bridge was small. I covered a tire replacement when her car failed inspection. She paid half of it back. The second was a security deposit after a roommate left suddenly. She paid none of it back, but she cried when she asked, and I told myself that counted as context. After that came a phone bill, a late utility payment, a short hotel stay while an apartment was being repaired, and a credit card minimum after a client paid her late. None of those moments had made me angry on their own. What bothered me, years later, was the pattern around them. Lila never said, "I expect you to fix this." She said, "I don't know what I'm going to do." Mom translated that into, "Your sister needs you." And I translated it into an automatic transfer before I had even decided whether I wanted to help. I worked in compliance operations for a regional nonprofit. My job involved tracking who approved what, when a deadline changed, and whether the written record matched the story people told after the fact. It had taught me that intent mattered, but documentation mattered too. People remembered agreements in ways that protected them. Records remembered what actually happened. At home, I tried not to use that part of my brain. I did not want family to feel like work. So I let conversations stay verbal and vague. I accepted phrases like "just until Friday," "I'll figure it out," and "you know I'll make it right." The problem was that vagueness always favored the person asking. The night Lila brought the Harbor Row form, I went home and opened a folder on my laptop called Family Transfers. It was not dramatic. It was a folder I had started after I accidentally paid the same utility bill twice, because Mom had told me Lila had already covered it. I had saved confirmations, screenshots, and notes in case I ever needed to remember why my balance was lower than I expected. There were 32 files. Some were tiny. Some made my stomach tighten. The combined amount was not life-changing, but it was enough to show a role I had not named. I was not merely a sister. I was the emergency reserve account everyone could reach, without asking the bank. The Harbor Row deposit was different, because this time the risk was not only money. It was my name inside a leasing system. It was a form that could become an obligation simply because I had been too embarrassed to slow down the room. By midnight, I had stopped wondering whether calling the leasing office would be rude. I started wondering why Lila had not wanted me to call at all. There were also things Lila had given me over the years. Rides when my car was in the shop, late-night calls when I was grieving a breakup, laughter when I took my life too seriously. I did not want my memory to become a ledger of what she owed me. But love, without boundaries, had made me dishonest with myself. I had begun measuring care by how little I asked for in return. The more I understood that, the less I wanted to turn her into a villain. She was my sister, and she was also an adult. Both truths could exist in the same room. The next morning, I called Harbor Row from my office parking lot before I went inside. I did not want to make the call at my desk, where I might have to lower my voice and pretend I was discussing a dentist appointment. I wanted space. I wanted to hear every word without a coworker walking by at the wrong moment. A leasing coordinator named Morgan answered after 2 rings. Her voice was polished but kind. I gave her the reference number from the form and said, "My name is Nora Ellis. I was told I'm listed on an application as an additional deposit party. I need to understand what that means before I sign anything. There was a pause while she opened the file. Yes, Morgan said. I see you here. You were added yesterday afternoon. By who? The primary applicant, Lila Ellis. I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed by someone outside my family made the whole thing feel less like a misunderstanding and more like a decision. Is there a deposit already paid? I asked. A holding deposit was submitted from an account ending in 4,418, Morgan said. The application notes list you as the person responsible for replenishing any portion of the deposit that is applied to damage, unpaid rent, or early termination costs. For a moment I did not speak. Responsible for replenishing. I repeated. Morgan slowed down. The primary applicant selected a split deposit arrangement. It means the building can contact either listed deposit party if the lease is executed and there is a charge against the deposit. The final terms depend on the lease packet, but your profile was marked as a financial backstop. A financial backstop. Lila had called it a small favor. The form described me as the person whose money would catch the fall if something went wrong. Did I approve that? I asked. Morgan checked again. I don't see a completed consent form from you. There is an email address on file, though. It looks like an invitation was sent yesterday at 3:17 p.m. I searched my inbox while she spoke. Nothing. Then I checked spam. Nothing. Finally, I looked at my blocked addresses. There it was. A Harbor Row invitation had been automatically filtered because Lila had once used a forwarding address associated with my old shared apartment. I had never seen it. The invitation had a draft consent page attached. The page did not say supportive contact. It said deposit liability acknowledgment. Morgan offered to resend it directly. I asked her to do that and to note that I had not authorized any use of my name. Would you like me to remove you from the application? She asked. The question was simple. The answer was not. I thought of Lila at the kitchen table, pen in hand, acting as if the only barrier between her and a new apartment was my signature. I thought of Mom saying the unit would be gone. I thought of all the times urgency had been used to make my decision look selfish. Not yet, I said. Please put the application on hold and send me the full deposit terms. Morgan said she could do that. She also said, carefully, for your protection, please don't sign any acknowledgement until you've reviewed the lease packet in full. When the call ended, I sat in the parking lot with the phone in my lap. The first thing I felt was anger. The second was relief. One call had not fixed the situation. It had only made it visible. But visibility was the beginning of every boundary I had ever failed to set. Before going into the office, I took a screenshot of the email invitation and forwarded it to my private address. It was a small habit from work. Preserve the original before replying. I hated that family had taught me to do that. Still, the act gave me a steadier feeling. I was not collecting evidence to punish Lila. I was making sure that the version of events did not change every time someone remembered it differently. The fact that I needed that protection did not make me disloyal. It made me awake. Morgan's email arrived an hour later with 3 attachments: the application summary, the deposit acknowledgement, and a preliminary lease estimate. I did not open them until lunch because I knew I needed a clear head. The documents were not hard to read. That was what made them disturbing. The holding deposit was $2,800. Lila had paid $600 from her account. The remaining $2,200 was listed as pending from additional deposit party, which was me. The form also stated that if she received the apartment and later missed rent, caused damage or broke the lease early, Harbour Row could apply the deposit and seek replenishment from either named party under the executed agreement. The language was not sensational. It was ordinary rental language. But it turned Mom's story into something false. I was not being asked to encourage my sister. I was being asked to make myself financially reachable for a lease I had not chosen. I also noticed something else. Lila's projected rent was almost half her average monthly income from the last 6 months. The building had approved the application conditionally because she had provided a letter showing anticipated client work. The letter was real, but it did not guarantee anything. The preliminary estimate included parking, utility administration, pet fees, and a move-in charge she had not mentioned. I printed the pages and highlighted only the facts that involved me. I did not circle every risk or write angry comments in the margins. I knew that once a family argument became a storm of emotions, people stopped seeing the actual question. The question was simple. Why had my name been added before anyone asked me? I called Lila in the afternoon. She answered on the 4th ring. "Did you call them?" she asked immediately. "Yes." Silence. "So you know it's not a big deal," she said. "It's just a deposit arrangement. It says I'm responsible if the deposit is used or the lease ends early, only if something goes wrong. Nothing is going to go wrong." That sentence had been the foundation of every favor I regretted. "Why did you add me without asking?" Lila exhaled. "Because I knew you would panic if I explained it first. And I knew you'd probably say no because you make everything into a policy meeting." For a second, I had no response. Not because she was right, but because she had said the quiet part aloud. She had not asked because my answer mattered. She had avoided asking because my answer might interrupt her plan. "I don't make things into policy meetings," I said. "I ask what I'm agreeing to. You've helped before. Helping before isn't permission to use my name now." Her voice sharpened. "You always talk like I'm trying to scam you. I'm your sister. No. I'm talking like I'm someone whose name was put on a financial form without consent." She hung up before I finished the sentence. That evening, Mom left voicemails. In the first, she said Lila was hurt. In the second, she said I was taking this too far. I saved both messages. Then I opened a new note and wrote the exact line I had been avoiding for years. Family closeness does not cancel informed consent. The lease estimate also reminded me that buildings, banks, and companies do not understand a family phrase like I thought she would help. They understand names, signatures, payment sources, and obligations. That was the difference I wanted my parents to see. Inside our family, assumptions could float in the air and sound harmless. Outside it, they became lines on a form. I had spent years forgiving assumptions because they came from people I loved. The leasing office had no reason to forgive them for me. The next 2 days were full of the kind of urgency that makes a person doubt her own judgment. Mom called before breakfast. Lila texted after lunch. Dad, who had returned from his work trip, sent a message that said only, "Can we talk like adults about this?" That message annoyed me more than it should have. I had been trying to talk like an adult from the beginning. I had asked what the form meant. I had called the leasing office. I had read the documents. The accusation was not that I was immature. The accusation was that I had refused to make adulthood convenient for everyone else. Dad wanted us to meet at a coffee shop near my parents' house. I agreed because I did not want the conversation to happen through voice notes. that could be misunderstood later. He was already seated when I arrived. He had ordered my usual coffee, which felt like an attempt to soften something he did not want to examine. "Your sister is under pressure," he said after I sat down. "You know how hard it is to find housing right now." "I know," I said. "That's why I read the documents." She didn't mean any harm. Maybe she didn't. But she added my name as a financial backstop without asking. Dad rubbed his forehead. "She thought you would help." "That isn't the same as asking." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Nora, sometimes family has to move quickly. You can't make people fill out a form every time they need support." I had expected guilt. I had not expected the sentence to hurt so much. "I didn't ask for a form every time," I said. "I asked that my name not be placed on a form without me." The difference seemed obvious to me. It seemed invisible to him. I pulled out the printed acknowledgment and showed him the highlighted language. He read it once, then again. His expression changed slightly at the words deposit liability and early termination. "I didn't know it said that," he admitted. "Neither did I until I called." He was quiet. For a moment, I thought he might understand. Then he said, "But Lila has already put money down. If you pull out now, she loses it." There it was. The consequence of Lila's choice was already being transferred to me. "She could have asked before she paid," I said. Dad's jaw tightened. "You're focusing on the wrong thing." I almost laughed. The wrong thing had become a phrase in our family. It meant the thing that made someone uncomfortable to admit. "No," I said. "I'm finally focusing on the actual thing." When I got home, I made a list of what Lila had told us versus what the documents said. She said, "It's just a deposit." Documents said, "Shared liability after lease execution." She said, "You won't pay anything." Documents said, $2,200 pending from additional deposit party. She said, "I need a stable person connected to it." Documents said, "Financial backstop." The gap between words and records was not small. It was the whole story. I emailed Morgan and asked, what would happen if I requested removal before signing? She replied that the application could be revised, and Lila could submit a different deposit structure or choose another unit. Nothing would happen automatically without Lila's decision. Nothing would happen automatically. For the first time since the kitchen table request, I felt my breathing slow. I was not taking away my sister's housing. I was declining a role I had never agreed to play. After I sent the comparison list to myself, I made dinner and ate it, standing at the counter, because I could not settle. I hated that I still needed to prove I was not being unreasonable. But then I remembered something Morgan had said. Nothing would happen automatically. That sentence kept returning to me. The pressure in my family depended on things happening automatically, an expectation becoming a bill, a favor becoming a duty, a delay becoming a crisis. Slowing down was not cruelty. It was the first step toward choosing. That night, I went through my old bank statements, not because I wanted ammunition, but because I needed to understand why this request felt so familiar. The Harbor Row form had made something visible. My family had been treating availability as a kind of permission. If I had helped once, I could be assumed into the next situation. If I had stayed calm, I could be expected to stay quiet. If I had not complained, then apparently there had been no cost. I created a simple spreadsheet called Family Support and Financial Requests. The columns were not emotional. Date, request, amount, who asked, written confirmation, repayment or outcome. I copied only what I could verify, the tire replacement, the apartment deposit from 4 years earlier, the utilities, Dell. A computer Lila bought for freelance work and called essential. A late car payment that Mom said would affect insurance rates. The list was not enormous. It did not need to be. It showed a rhythm. What surprised me was how often there was no direct request from Lila. Mom would call. Dad would mention something at dinner. A crisis would be described in general terms, and I would offer money because I was the person in the family who made numbers less frightening. Then I found a text thread from the year Lila lost her old apartment. Mom had written, "Don't ask Nora yet. She's stressed. Just tell the landlord she can confirm it tomorrow." I read it twice. At the time, I had believed Mom was protecting me from pressure. In the light of the Harbor Row application, it looked different. My family had been using the time before I knew something as a space to build expectations around me. I was angry, but I was also sad. There is a particular sadness in discovering that people who love you have built a private system around your usefulness. They may not call it exploitation. They may call it confidence in you. They may call it family. But if your ability to say no is treated as a threat, then the relationship is already carrying more than affection. I did not send the spreadsheet to anyone. Not yet. I wanted to avoid turning the Harbor Row decision into a trial of every difficult memory. I needed one clear issue, my name on a deposit. Still, I saved the spreadsheet in the same folder as the lease documents. The record was not a weapon, it was context. It reminded me that the deposit was not the beginning of the conflict. It was simply the moment I had enough proof to stop calling the pattern a misunderstanding. At 10:12 p.m., Lila texted, "I'm sorry you're stressed, but please don't ruin this for me." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I am not ruining anything. I am asking for my name to be removed from an agreement I did not approve." She did not reply. The silence that followed felt unfamiliar. In the past, I would have filled it with reassurance. I would have written that I loved her, that I understood, that I could probably make something work. This time, I let the silence hold the question where it belonged. What was Lila willing to do once she could no longer use my name as part of the answer? I also noticed how much the word help had protected everyone from the truth. Help sounded generous. It did not show whether the person receiving it had asked responsibly, planned honestly, or expected the same help again next month. Help blurred the difference between a gift, a loan, and a hidden obligation. On the spreadsheet, I did not label anyone greedy or careless. I only labeled the facts. Seeing the facts side by side made the old language feel too small for what it had been carrying. The next morning, Morgan called me rather than emailing. She said Lila had asked Harbor Row why the application was on hold. "I want to be transparent," Morgan said. "We told her that the additional deposit party requested a review. We did not share anything else." "That's fine," I said. "There is one thing you may want to know," she continued. "The portal history shows that your name, email, and phone number were entered during the same session as Lila's income documents. The consent box was left unchecked. It was not a dramatic revelation. It was a time stamp. A simple record of what had happened. But it answered the question Lila had kept trying to blur. She had not added me by accident. She had not assumed the office would contact me later. She had entered me, skipped the consent step, and moved forward hoping that urgency would handle the rest. Morgan asked whether I wanted a copy of the application history. I said yes. When it arrived, I printed it. The page had Lila's name, the application time, and a note that said additional party consent pending. Below that was a reminder generated by the system, Do not execute agreement until consent is completed. I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, clarity. At noon, Lila came to my apartment without calling first. I opened the door because I did not want a hallway scene, but I kept the chain on until I saw that she was alone. Her eyes were red. "Can we talk?" I let her in. She stood by the window, looking at the view she had once said was too boring for a person our age. "Morgan said you asked for records. I asked what was attached to my name. You made me look dishonest." The sentence was so familiar that, for a moment, I almost apologized. Then I remembered the portal history. "I didn't make you look anything," I said. The record showed what happened. She crossed her arms. "I was going to ask you. I just needed to get the unit held first." "Why? Because you would have taken too long, or because I might have said no." She looked away. That was the closest thing to an answer I got. Lila told me she had found the apartment after a difficult month with a roommate who drank too much, left doors unlocked, and brought strangers home. I knew some of that was true. I also knew fear could be real without making someone else's consent optional. "I want you to be safe," I said. "I want you to have a stable home. But I can't be listed as a financial backstop for a lease I didn't choose. So you're just going to let me lose the apartment? I'm going to let you decide what apartment you can take on without my name." Her face folded in on itself. She looked younger than 30, younger than the sister who had once jumped from the high branch because she trusted I would catch her. "You don't know what it feels like to always be behind," she whispered. I wanted to say that I did know. I knew because I had spent years carrying the part of her life that fell behind, but I did not say it cruelly. "I know it feels frightening," I told her. "That's why we need to make decisions before they become emergencies." She left without hugging me. After the door closed, I sat on the floor with the portal history in my hands. It was not the page that changed my relationship with my sister. It was the fact that, for the first time, I let the page speak before I tried to make everyone feel better. That evening, I made copies of the portal history and put one in a folder by my desk. I did not know whether I would ever need it again, but I knew I needed to stop treating my own discomfort as insufficient evidence. The consent box had been empty. The invitation had not reached me. The application had moved forward anyway. There was nothing abstract about that. My sister's fear was real, but the choice she made was real too. I could care about both without erasing either one. That afternoon, Mom called with a new explanation. Lila had already borrowed money from a coworker to make the $600 payment. If the application failed, she would have to repay it quickly. Mom said this as if it created a debt I had somehow caused. "I didn't tell her to pay anything before she had consent," I said. "You're being technical again," Mom answered. I had spent years being called technical whenever I introduced a fact that changed the emotional story. Technical meant inconvenient. Technical meant not accepting a version of events that required me to sacrifice quietly. "This isn't technical," I said. "It's money and my name." Mom started to cry, not loudly. The kind of crying that asked me to become the calm one, the forgiving one, the person who made the room easier to live in. "Your sister finally found something good," she said. "Can't you just sign and work it out later?" I looked at the deposit acknowledgement on my desk. "Work it out later." That was another family phrase. It meant someone else's urgency had already been accepted, and my boundaries could be solved after the cost became mine. "No," I said. "I'm not signing a liability agreement and working it out later." The call ended badly. I did not enjoy that. I did not feel empowered by it. I felt sick for an hour. Then Morgan emailed me an update. Harbor Row had given Lila 3 options: revise the application with a guarantor who completed consent, increase the deposit from her own funds, or choose a smaller unit with a lower requirement. The holding period would last until noon the next day. There were options. Again, there were options. The story that I was destroying everything depended on pretending there was only one path: my signature. I forwarded the email to Lila and our parents with a short note. The building has confirmed that the application can be revised. I will not complete the deposit acknowledgement. Please do not list my name on future applications, deposits, accounts, or financial forms without asking and receiving written consent. Was all. Dad replied first. This could have been handled privately. I stared at the screen, confused. It had been private. I had called the leasing office privately. I had spoken to Lila privately. I had met Dad privately. The only thing that had become visible was the consequence of a choice everyone wanted me to absorb without discussion. I replied, I am handling it privately. I'm also handling it clearly. Lila did not respond for 4 hours. Then she wrote, I'm applying for the smaller unit. The message should have made me relieved. Instead, it made me aware of how much energy had gone into preventing that obvious decision. The smaller unit was not a punishment. It was not proof that I had won. It was simply the apartment that fit the money and responsibility Lila was prepared to carry herself. That distinction mattered. I did not want my sister to suffer. I wanted her to stop building her stability on my silence. I went for a walk after the email exchange because my apartment felt too quiet. The streetlights were coming on and people were carrying groceries, walking dogs, hurrying home from work. Ordinary lives moved around me with ordinary expenses. Nobody would have looked at me and guessed that I was trying to explain why a deposit form mattered. But it mattered because it was the shape of a larger question. Could I say no before the consequence became visible? Could I refuse to be blamed for a decision I did not make? My parents invited us to Sunday dinner 3 days later. The invitation came through a group text with no explanation, which was exactly how difficult conversations had always been scheduled in our family. I considered declining. Then I thought about what I wanted this story to become. Avoiding every room where people misunderstood me would only keep the old pattern intact. So I said I would come, but I added one sentence. I will not discuss signing any agreement or taking on any financial responsibility at dinner. Mom sent a thumbs up emoji. Dad sent nothing. When I arrived, the table was set to carefully. Lila was already there. She looked tired, but not angry. That made me more cautious, not less. Dinner started with ordinary conversation. Dad asked about my work. Mom talked about a neighbor's garden. Lila described the smaller Harbor Row unit in neutral terms. It was still close to transit. It had no river view. It had 1 bedroom and a smaller move-in charge. It's actually fine, she said, pushing a piece of chicken around her plate. I just wanted the other one because it felt like a fresh start. Nobody answered at first. Then Mom said we all want fresh starts. We just need to remember family has to support each other. The old sentence entered the room and waited for me to carry it. I set down my fork. Family support should be voluntary. Mom's face tightened. Dad looked at the table. Lila surprised me. She's right, she said quietly. Mom turned toward her. Lila, don't say that like Nora is the only person who cares about you. I didn't say that, Lila replied. I said she's right. I shouldn't have added her name. It was not a full apology. But it was the first time she had said it in front of our parents. Dad cleared his throat. We all made assumptions. That's the problem, I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking under the table. Everyone made assumptions about what I would carry. Mom began to say something, then stopped. I took out the printed portal history and set it beside my plate. I did not wave it around. I did not read it like an accusation. I said, "The building's record shows my name was entered without consent. That's why I called." I needed facts before I signed anything. Dad read the page. Lila stared at her napkin. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I continued. "I'm saying that from now on, if someone needs financial help, the request needs to be direct, specific, and written. No one should tell a landlord, a bank, a building, or anyone else that I'm responsible before I agree." The room was quiet. Mom looked wounded. "You make it sound like we've been using you." I did not answer immediately. That was the moment when the old version of me would have rushed to reassure her. I would have said, "No, of course not. You're wonderful. I'm just stressed." But reassurance was how clarity disappeared. "I think you've depended on me in ways that weren't always fair," I said. "And I think I let it happen because I didn't know how to say no without feeling guilty." Lila began to cry quietly. I reached for my water, not because I wanted to escape the moment, but because I wanted to stay in it without changing the truth. That was the first family dinner where I did not rescue everyone from the discomfort created by an honest sentence. When I got home from dinner, I noticed that my shoulders hurt from holding myself so still. Being calm is not the absence of feeling. Sometimes it is the work of feeling everything and refusing to turn it into a weapon. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote down the parts of the conversation I wanted to remember. Lila had admitted the mistake. Mom had felt accused. Dad had finally read the record. None of it was neat, but it was honest. Honest was more useful than neat. After dinner, Dad asked me to stay while Mom washed dishes and Lila went upstairs to call a friend. He stood by the counter with the portal history in one hand. "I didn't know the deposit arrangement worked like that," he said. "I know," I replied. "Your mother, and I thought you were just helping Lila get approved." I nodded. That's what Lila said too. But it wasn't what the document said. Dad looked down. "We should have asked more questions." It was not an apology exactly, but it was closer than I had expected. I opened the spreadsheet on my phone and showed him the list of past requests. I did not need him to see every amount. I wanted him to see the pattern. There were moments he had forgotten, not because they were unimportant to me, but because he had not been the one whose account changed. When the favor became real, he scrolled silently. "I thought you were doing these things because you wanted to," he said finally. "Sometimes I was," I told him. "Sometimes I did want to help. But wanting to help once is different from being expected to help every time." He handed the phone back. "What do you want from us now?" It was a better question than any I had heard all week. "I want direct requests," I said. "I want time to think. I want no one to use my name, credit, account information, email, or reputation as proof that I will take responsibility. And I want it to be okay for me to say no." Dad nodded slowly. Mom came back into the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder. She had heard enough to know what we were discussing. "We raised you to be responsible," she said. "You did," I answered. "But responsibility isn't the same as availability." Her eyes filled, and I felt the old pull to soften the sentence. I softened my voice instead. "I love you. I'm not leaving the family. I'm changing the way I participate in it." That was the truth I needed them to hear. No one shouted. No one walked out. The conversation was still painful. It still left parts of everyone exposed, but it did not become cruel. Later that night, Lila sent me a photo from the leasing office. She had signed for the smaller unit. The caption said, "It's not what I pictured, but it's mine." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I'm glad it's yours. Not ours, not mine in the background. Not a future obligation hidden inside a deposit form. Yours." The word felt like both a boundary and a blessing. For the first time, Dad did not ask me to forgive everyone before they understood what they had done. He asked what I needed. It was a small shift, but I felt it immediately. Questions create room, assumptions close it. I had lived for too long inside rooms, where the answer had been decided before I arrived. That night, I left my parents' house with no promise that everything would be fixed, but with the strange relief of knowing I had finally spoken in a way that did not abandon me. The Monday after Lila signed her smaller lease, I wrote an email to my family. I almost did not send it. Written boundaries can feel severe when your family is used to handling everything through tone and memory, but that was exactly why I wrote it. The subject line was simple: future financial requests. I wrote that I loved them. I wrote that I wanted to be able to help sometimes, but only when help was requested honestly and chosen freely. Then I listed 5 rules. No one may use my name, address, email, phone number, credit information, or employment details on an application, lease, deposit, loan, account, or contract without my written permission. Requests for money need to include the amount, purpose, repayment expectations, and deadline. I will not answer urgent requests on the spot unless there is an immediate safety issue. A past gift or favor does not create an automatic future obligation. No one may describe me to another person or company as financially responsible without my consent. I read the email 10 times before sending it. The rules looked formal. They sounded like work. But the more I looked at them, the more I understood that the formality was not the problem. The problem was that my family had treated clear boundaries as colder than quiet resentment. Dad replied within an hour, "Received. We will respect this." Mom replied later, "I'm sorry that you felt you had to write this." The wording stung. She was still making my response the source of sadness, but I did not argue. I wrote back, "I'm sorry, we needed it too. I hope it helps us communicate better." Lila did not respond until the next day. Her message was longer. She said she was embarrassed. She said she had been desperate to get out of her old situation and had convinced herself that once I saw the apartment, I would want to help. She said she had not thought about what it meant to put my name in a portal without permission because she had been thinking only about getting approved. Then she wrote those on to make it okay. I called her that night. We talked about the smaller apartment, her budget, and the clients she was waiting to hear from. I did not offer money. She did not ask. It was strange at first, like we were both learning a new language. Before we hung up, she said, "I thought you were trying to prove you were better than me." "I wasn't," I said. "I was trying to stop feeling like your plans could become my responsibilities without anyone asking me." She was quiet for a moment. "I get it," she said. I did not know whether she fully did. Understanding is not a switch. It is a practice. But she had begun to say the words without defending the behavior first. For our family, that was new. After sending the rules, I put my phone face down and made myself wait. I did not monitor the family group chat. I did not create explanations for every possible response. That was another old habit, preparing to manage everyone else's reaction before I had allowed myself one. The boundaries were not a punishment, they were a map. And maps only work when the people using them can see where the lines actually are. Lila moved into Harbor Row at the end of the month. The smaller unit had pale walls, one narrow bedroom, and a kitchen that barely fit a two-person table. It was not the glossy apartment from the brochure. It was also not a disaster. She made it hers slowly. She bought second-hand shelves. She found a used rug online. She said the lack of parking forced her to walk more, which she hated at first, and then pretended was intentional. I visited 2 weeks after she moved in. I brought a plant and a bag of groceries, both things I chose without being asked. That difference mattered to me. On the counter was a handwritten budget: rent, utilities, client income, groceries, savings, deposit replenishment goal. She had written the numbers in black marker and crossed out nothing. "I'm trying to make it real," she said when she saw me looking. "It is real," I told her. She nodded. "That's what I'm learning." She had taken on an extra freelance project that she did not like. She sold an expensive desk she had bought during a better month. She cancelled a subscription she had been keeping out of habit. None of it was dramatic. None of it made her a villain or a victim. It was simply what responsibility looked like when it belonged to the person making the choices. At one point, she stood by the window and said, "I was so mad at you because I thought you wanted me to settle. I wanted you to choose something you could hold on your own," I said. She looked at the building across the street. "There's a difference, isn't there?" Yes, the deposit had been the first visible boundary. But the real change was that Lila had started to plan without assuming I would be underneath the plan. Mom struggled more than Lila did. She still called me whenever something worried her. But now, when the call drifted toward a request, I asked the same questions I asked at work. What is needed? Who is it? What options exist? When do you need an answer? At first, she would sigh. Then, gradually, she began answering. The questions did not make me less loving. They made everyone more honest. One afternoon, Lila texted the family group. I paid my first month from client work and did not touch the deposit. Dad sent 3 clapping emojis. Mom wrote, "We're proud of you." I wrote, "Congratulations. That's a real milestone." No one mentioned the old apartment. No one mentioned my name on the form, but I thought about it anyway. For years, I had believed that protecting someone meant making the hard part disappear before they had to face it. I was beginning to understand that sometimes protection meant letting a person carry what was actually theirs, while still standing close enough to cheer when they did. Seeing Lila's budget on the counter changed something in me too. I had feared that refusing the deposit would make her life smaller. Instead, it had made her choices visible to her. She was not suddenly perfect or financially secure. She was learning the ordinary discipline that I had been shielding her from. I felt proud of her, and I also felt sad that it had taken conflict to make room for that pride. But perhaps real pride required the person being proud to have done something that was actually theirs. 3 months later, the next request came in a different form. Mom called me on a Thursday night. Dad's car needed repairs, and the mechanic wanted a deposit before ordering a part. Her voice had the old urgency in it, but there was something different too. She did not begin with, "Can you send money?" She said, "I want to ask you something, and it is okay to say no." I sat down at my kitchen table. She explained the amount, the repair, the date, and what she and Dad could contribute. She said they were short by $280 and could repay it in 2 payments by the end of the month. It was the kind of request I might have received years earlier, in a sentence and a sigh. This time it had shape. "Thank you for explaining it," I said. Mom paused. Is that a yes? It's me thinking about it, I answered. She laughed softly, not happily, but with recognition. Right. Thinking about it. I did think about it. I looked at my own budget. I considered whether the repair was necessary, whether the repayment plan was realistic, and whether I actually wanted to help. Then I said yes, but I wrote it in a text. I can cover $280 as a one-time loan. Please confirm you can repay $140 on the 15th and $140 on the 30th. Dad replied with a thumbs up and, a minute later, a real message. Confirmed. Thank you. The money came back exactly as promised. It did not erase the Harbor Row deposit. It did not repair every difficult thing in our family, but it proved something important. Clear boundaries did not destroy family support. They made support less resentful, less mysterious, and more likely to be real. Lila saw the text thread when she visited Mom one weekend. She called me afterward. You got Dad to write an actual repayment plan, she said. He did it himself, I told her. Still, that would never have happened before. No, it would not have. Before, I would have paid and hoped. They would have thanked me and forgotten. The next request would arrive with the same confusion and guilt attached. Now, there was a record. Not because I wanted to keep score, because everyone deserved to know what had been agreed to. That was the quiet consequence of the deposit I never signed. It changed the way our family asked for help. And it changed the way I heard the word family when someone used it to reach for my name. That second request also showed me what I wanted our family to become. I did not want a home where everyone documented every kindness, like a transaction. I wanted a home where people could ask, without manipulation, and answer without fear. The written plan did not take warmth away from Dad's request. It let me say yes, without wondering whether the yes would quietly expand after I hung up. There was more love in that clarity than there had ever been in the old panic. 6 months after the Harbor Row application, Lila invited me over for dinner in her apartment. She had hung art on the walls and built a small desk by the window. The plant I brought had grown new leaves. The place looked nothing like the brochure, but it looked lived in. It looked earned. After dinner, she handed me a card. Inside, she had written, "Thank you for not letting me make you responsible for a life I needed to learn to manage." I read it twice. Then I looked at her. "Thank you for learning from it." We both cried a little, which embarrassed us enough to laugh. Later, walking to my car, I thought about the form on my parents' kitchen table. The blank signature line. The way everyone had watched me hold the pen as if my refusal to sign was the problem. I had thought boundaries would feel like slamming a door. They did not. They felt like reading the label before I agreed to carry the box. I still helped my family. I still loved them. I still answered calls, brought groceries, celebrated birthdays, and worried when someone was struggling. But I no longer confused love with the permanent availability of my name, my account, or my future. The one call I made before signing did not turn me into a colder sister. It turned me into a clearer one. That was what I signed instead. Not a deposit agreement. Not a hidden financial backstop. Not another vague promise that I would rescue someone because I always had. I signed my name to a different kind of rule. I would be generous by choice, not by pressure. I would listen before I decided. I would ask what something truly meant before I let anyone call it small. And when my family needed help, they would have to ask me directly, not a leasing office, not a portal, not a form filled out in advance. Me. I keep the original Harbor Row invitation in a folder now. Not because I want to relive it, but because it reminds me that the most important changes often begin before anyone else thinks they are important. A blank consent box. A phone call. A sentence said without raising my voice. Those were small things. But they were mine. And every time I look at that old form, I remember that a signature is not proof of love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is wait until you understand what your name is being asked to carry.